Well, I'm from a very ordinary working class background. My mum was a cleaning lady, my dad was a milkman who later had his own insurance business, so quite a kind of standard working class background. And it is interesting because expectations were probably fairly low, I would guess. I mean, I think my older brother was the first one in my family who ever went to university, and I guess, you know, that no one was really expecting me to be a writer or to be as successful as I've been. I mean, for example, I wrote my first child spy book, The Recruit, and I wrote it in 2002 and 2003. And at that time, another writer, Anthony Horowitz, had by pure coincidence published a children's spy book that I didn't know anything about. That became very successful, and just at the point when I was sending my children's spy book to publishers, children's spy books were hot, so that was just purely luck. And I think that's one of the most important things about success. I think a lot of people will try and rationalise and claim why, you know, the reason why they're successful, and I think the element of luck is huge. If Anthony Horowitz hadn't written the Alex Rider books, my books would never have got published, but it just happened. I wrote a book at the right time, all the publishers were looking for a children's spy book. If I'd waited until Anthony Horowitz was successful, I would have been too late. Because by that time every publisher was looking and loads of other people were trying to copy that success. So sometimes I think you just need a little bit of luck as well, and I think that's greatly underestimated. Yeah, I mean, there are all those sort of cliche phrases, you know, the harder I work, the luckier I get, and I definitely think you can make your own luck. You know, if you're an author and you're disciplined and you publish books regularly and you listen to your audience and things like that, you can certainly enhance, you know, your chances of being lucky. But I think every single successful person, if they're completely honest, will admit that somewhere down the line there's a big chunk of luck. And I mean, one of the things I very often do, you know, if I'm hanging out with a group of fellow author friends and I've read some of their books, and I think some of these writers are more talented than me, some of these writers are fantastic, they're great people, they write amazing books, but they have very limited success. You know, most of them are published, but you know, their books maybe sell a few thousand copies, whereas my books have sold millions of copies, and there isn't that big a difference. I think my greatest achievement, and it's one of those things that's semi-accidental, when I started writing the Cherub books, I was really thinking about my nephew Jared. He was about 12 or 13 at the time, and Jared was just a kid who wasn't into books and wasn't really into reading. So when I was writing The Recruit, my first book, I was really thinking about this idea of writing a book that was for someone like Jared, someone who didn't like Harry Potter, someone who wasn't a big reader. And that actually worked incredibly well, because I get so much feedback saying, you know, oh, my kid didn't read before they read your books, or I get kids who said, I really started reading and got interested in reading, and it's really helped my English at school and stuff like that. So the idea that, you know, quite genuinely above any commercial success that my books have had, there are genuinely sort of several hundred or maybe several thousand kids out there in the world to whom my books have actually made a real difference to their achievement levels and what they think they can attain in life is actually quite amazing when I think about that.
What would you tell your 11-year-old self?
What would I tell my 11-year-old self? Do you know, I think probably the one thing I would tell my 11-year-old self is just to be a bit more confident, because I think at that age, and especially as you get into your teenage years, you know, there are so many things you don't do just because you're worried about them. You know, you're worried about asking a girl, you're worried about learning a musical instrument, you're worried that your mates are going to laugh at you. And I kind of wish that I could go back and tell my 11-year-old self, you know, just be a bit bolder, just try, you know, just try doing some different stuff, just be a bit more adventurous, because I think very often with kids, they're just genuinely quite cautious about what they do. I mean, I think it's that thing of, I think if you're satisfied with what you've got, you're always going to go backwards, because if you have success doing one thing and you just repeat that over and over again, I think you're destined just to do a paler copy of what you've done before. I mean, even if I write a book that's just like my first book, The Recruit, and it's just as good, people are going to look at it and say, well, you're just doing the same thing again. So I guess any successful person has to kind of reinvent themselves and think about things and constantly strive to do new things and different things. I mean, I always think, you know, when they talk about Steve Jobs, one of the things that always fascinates me about Steve Jobs is they talk about, oh, well, Steve Jobs founded Apple. But it wasn't just the fact that he got a bit lucky and founded Apple and was in the right place at the right time, because then Steve Jobs leaves Apple, gets sacked by Apple, goes off, and then he basically buys Pixar from Lucasfilm and turns it into a massively successful film studio. And that to me is really significant. You know, it's probably the sign of someone who's really successful. It's not that they just get a bit lucky and they have one success, but they have that ability. You know, they found Apple, they leave, get sacked by Apple, they found Pixar, which becomes this massive film studio, merges with Disney. I think, you know, when Steve Jobs died, he wasn't just the founder of Apple, he was the biggest shareholder in Disney. and then he comes back to Apple and makes Apple very successful again. So it's that ability to, you know, have the drive to reinvent and do something different and create new successes, I guess, that defines a really successful person. And I guess, you know, if you come back to me in sort of 20 years' time and said, do I regard myself as a successful person, or did I just get lucky? You know, that's going to depend. If I've done something else after Cherub that's been successful, then I would probably feel really strongly that I was driving and the motivating force. Whereas if it was just my Cherub books that had been successful, it would probably be, well, you know, I was just in the right place at the right time, and I'm not the genius that I like to think I am.